There are moments when you say something and the room becomes quiet, not because you were the loudest person there, not because you demanded to be heard, but because somehow you saw what everyone else had been standing too close to see. They look at you differently now. They wonder how you knew, how you noticed the change in a voice, how you caught the hesitation behind a smile, how you understood what was never spoken, how you could feel the truth moving beneath the surface while everyone else was busy admiring the appearance of things. And perhaps they call it intuition. Perhaps they call it intelligence. Perhaps they simply cannot name it at all, but you know where it came from. It came from paying attention, from surviving moments that taught you to listen beyond words, from watching people carefully enough to recognize patterns, from learning that silence can speak, that behavior can reveal what language tries to hide, and that the smallest detail can sometimes carry the weight of an entire truth. You do not need to prove that you see. Clearly, the people around you will eventually reveal themselves, and when they turn toward you with that startled look, the look that asks, "How could you possibly have known?" you may realize something powerful. You were never guessing. You were observing. You were listening. You were remembering. And while they were trying to understand the world as it appeared, you had already begun understanding the world as it was. Some people hear words. Others hear what lives underneath them. They notice the pause before an answer, the smile that arrives too late, the sudden change in someone's voice, the silence that says more than 100 explanations ever could. This kind of intelligence does not always announce itself. It sits quietly. It watches. It remembers. It waits until the pieces begin to form a picture that other people cannot yet see. You may have experienced this yourself. You walk into a room and immediately sense that something has changed. Nobody tells you, nobody explains it. Yet you feel it. Something in the atmosphere is different. Someone who usually speaks freely is suddenly careful. Someone who always looks you in the eyes begins looking away. A familiar conversation carries an unfamiliar weight. You notice these things because your mind has learned not merely to hear what people say, but to observe what they do. That is where quiet intelligence becomes powerful. It is not about knowing everything. It is about paying enough attention to recognize what repeats. Human beings reveal themselves through patterns. The same excuses, the same reactions, the same hesitation, the same promises followed by the same behavior. When you have watched closely enough, you begin to understand that people often tell you who they are without ever saying the words directly, and this can make others uncomfortable. They may wonder why you stopped asking questions, why you became quieter, why you no longer react the way you once did. They may think you suddenly changed, when the truth is that you simply started seeing more clearly. You learned that not every truth needs to be confronted immediately. Not every secret needs to be exposed. Not every battle deserves your energy. Sometimes wisdom is knowing what you have discovered and choosing silence, because silence gives you room to watch what happens. Next, people may mistake your silence for weakness, because they do not understand what is happening inside it. They do not see the thousands of observations passing through your mind. They do not know how many moments you have stored away, how many contradictions you have noticed, how many times you have compared someone's words with their actions. Then one day, you say something simple and suddenly they are shocked. How did you know? You knew because you were paying attention when they assumed nobody was watching. You knew because your intelligence was not built only from books, degrees, or clever answers. It was built from experience, from disappointment, from curiosity, from listening, from learning the difference between what people say and what they consistently do. Never underestimate the power of observation. The person who watches carefully can sometimes understand what the person who speaks endlessly never sees. Your greatest intelligence may not be the ability to tell people what they want to hear. It may be the courage to remain quiet long enough to hear what they are actually revealing. And when you finally understand what is happening, you do not need to shout that you were right. Because the truth has a way of speaking for itself. What people call intuition is often a lifetime of lessons speaking in a language that does not need words. It is that quiet feeling that tells you something is not right, even when everything looks perfectly acceptable on the surface. It is the hesitation that rises inside you before you make a decision, the sense that you should wait, look again, listen more carefully. Others may call it luck. They may call it a strange gift. But many times, intuition is simply experience, becoming so deeply familiar that your mind recognizes a pattern before you consciously understand it. Every experience leaves something behind. The disappointment teaches you to recognize certain promises. The betrayal teaches you to notice certain behaviors. The mistake teaches you to question what once seemed obvious. The difficult season teaches you patience. The people who entered your life and left it teach you what consistency looks like and what it does not. You become a student of life without realizing you have enrolled. That is why you sometimes know before you can explain. You have seen something similar before, maybe not in exactly the same form, but enough of its shape is familiar. Your mind remembers what your conscious thoughts have forgotten. A certain tone, a certain expression, a certain pattern of behavior can awaken an understanding buried beneath years of experience, and people may not understand it. They may ask, "Why don't you trust this?" You may not have a perfect answer. You simply know, but knowing does not mean you should become suspicious of everyone. Intuition is not fear. Fear tells you to run from everything unfamiliar. Intuition invites you to pause and pay attention. There is a difference. One is controlled by panic. The other is strengthened by awareness. The more you live, the more carefully you learn to separate the two. You begin understanding that not every closed door is rejection. Not every delay is failure. Not every person who smiles at you is sincere, and not every person who disagrees with you is against you. Experience teaches you to look beyond appearances, without becoming trapped by them. This is why what looks like luck from the outside may actually be preparation. Someone might watch you make a decision and wonder how you knew it was the right one. They may think you guessed correctly. They do not see the years behind that moment. They do not see the mistakes that taught you. They do not see the nights you spent questioning yourself. They do not see the people who taught you painful lessons about trust, boundaries, patience, and discernment. Your intuition carries those lessons. It remembers. And perhaps that is why you should stop apologizing for the wisdom you gained through difficult experiences. You did not become perceptive because life was always gentle with you. You became perceptive because you paid attention when life was teaching you. So trust yourself, but do not stop learning. Let intuition be a signal, not a sentence. Investigate, observe, listen. Give yourself enough silence to recognize what your experience is trying to tell you, because sometimes the answer arrives quietly, long before you can put it into words, and the deepest form of wisdom is knowing when to listen to that quiet voice within you.